Welcome back to another episode of Miller's Move It. It's Tuesday, so of course that means we get the revised handicap marks coming out this morning. And we also had a really good weekend of racing to look back on. I'm also pleased to say I've got what I think we can call the man of the moment, Charlie Deutsch, riding out of his skin, landing the Betfair Chase at Haydock on Saturday, a double at Ascot on Friday. He's our guest later on. We'll get all of his thoughts on the weekend that's gone and the season ahead. So we'll get straight into it and look back at a weekend that I thought was really interesting. Finally, the rain came. It looked like proper national hunt weather, mud flying everywhere. And first of all, the action at Ascot, which was a decent card, perhaps failed to live up to its height. Ascot, the 1965 chase, was won again by Pick Dory. He went off a very short price. I wasn't impressed all that much at all. He was £31 clear of the runner-up Hidden Depths on ratings. He ran about £10 better than him when you consider that he was conceding £6 and he won by 4 lengths. I wasn't very impressed at all. And having been a pretty big fan of Pick Dory and felt he was a slightly underrated horse, I'm now going to take the view that I'll look to oppose him in these Grade 2 races around the likes of Ascot and Kempton, that he seems to be a standing dish in. I wasn't too impressed at all. He's just started to look a little bit sort of lethargic in his racing. Haydock was a much better spectacle, and of course it all features around Royal Pagaille. It's now 5 from 6 at the track, ever so brave to win the Betfair Chase. Grey Dawning, it's a much overused phrase to say that the runner-up lost nothing in defeat, but he really didn't. He raced with exuberance, he jumped with real enthusiasm, and that's probably what put paid to his chance on a stamina-sapping track or ground over 3 mile, 1.5 furlongs. You need to race efficiently. Royal Pagaille certainly did that. As I'll talk to Charlie later, he didn't get very high at a couple of fences, but he was efficient in the way he went through his race. Grey Dawning, a younger horse, perhaps a bit more enthusiastic, raced inefficiently, and having got to the front going to the last, I still wasn't all that worried, having backed Royal Pagaille and tipped him on the Saturday podcast. I felt there was a bit more yet to come from him, and I wasn't certain that Grey Dawning would see it out. And just in the last 100 yards, Grey Dawning got very, very tired. Royal Pagaille got back up. In the immediate aftermath, the scouts clearly very pleased with their horse in runner-up, but they said that they're still determined to go to the Gold Cup. I'd urge them not to. I think this horse would be an absolute standout chance in the Ryanair Chase over 2 miles, 4.5. I just do not think he's going to stay the Gold Cup trip at all. This was 3 miles, 1.5. Yes, on very heavy ground, which you are likely to not get in the spring, but it's an easier track than Cheltenham. Cheltenham is a stiff track. They'll go an end-to-end gallop, and I just think if he didn't see this trip out, I don't see him staying the Gold Cup trip out. But the Scoutons have on record saying there is only one Gold Cup. That's the race they want to win. I completely understand that. But I'll oppose him in the Gold Cup. But I'd be a very big fan if they were to change their mind and send Grey Dawning to the Ryanair Chase. In Ireland, we had really good action over the weekend from Punchestown. First of all, we need to mention Ballyburn, who got his chasing career off to a very good start. He jumped well. He didn't jump quickly. It was a 2 mile, and he's got a big engine. Obviously, the Turners race is no longer available at the Cheltenham Festival, so connections are going to have to decide whether they're a 2 miler or a 3 miler, assuming they don't want to go down a handicap route. His engine suggests he's a 2 miler. His pedigree suggests he's a 3 mile. He jumped a bit more like a 3 miler than a 2 miler, but he will improve, I'm sure, with racing. And he was pretty good over the last couple when they got going a little bit quicker. I don't think we learned all that much. He's a safe enough jumper. He's a sound enough jumper. He knows what he's doing, and he's clearly still got that very big engine intact. But come the Arc, will be up against the likes of Le de Sud, who's an inferior rated horse and will likely be an inferior rated horse when they get there. But he looks like a really fast, electric 2 mile jumper. So at the moment, I wouldn't be keen to oppose Ballyburn for the Arkle, but I certainly wouldn't be wanting to take a short price about him either. He is just going to have to get a bit slicker with his jumping. On Saturday, the feature race was the Morgiana Hurdle, and Brighter Days Ahead. Really good piece of placing by Gordon Elliott to put her in here against State Man. Lossiemouth was a last-minute deflection with a stone bruise, and I couldn't see Brighter Days Ahead beating State Man, but she did. She made all the running. She made it a stamina test. State Man cruised up, got alongside her, actually got to the front, but wasn't overly fluent at the last hurdle. And Brighter Days Ahead, Judy got back up and out-battled him. She arrived here with the advantage of race fitness. Obviously, this was State Man's first start. I don't think Gordon Elliott and Connections will go for the champion hurdle. I'm sure come March, they, and particularly Giggleston, like to have Cheltenham winners, and they often say they don't mind what races it is in, they just want Cheltenham winners. I'm sure she'll end up in the mares, and I would be very confident that State Man, even at Cheltenham, a track he's perhaps not at his best at, would reverse this form with her come Cheltenham. I just was very taken with the way he cruised up to her, and I think it was only a lack of race fitness that meant he tired from the back of the last and allowed her to get up. But you have to credit Gordon Elliott and his team for having her ready for that, being brave enough to take him on, and Judy getting the job done. Sunday, again, the action at Punchestown, and Touch Me Not really impressed me, winning his novice chase. He was runner-up first time out, and a quieter ride. Here he was aggressively ridden by Sam Ewing and jumped really, really well. Jumped like a 2-mile chaser and beat the 146 rated Farron Glory. Farron Glory was making his chasing debut, but it was 146 rated over hurdles. That perhaps hadn't seen his ceiling either. He's a well-regarded horse in the Gordon Elliott yard. Touch Me Not had him beaten very comfortably by 6 lengths. Wasn't a great hurdler, Touch Me Not, but is making up into a very, very fine chaser. This was a grade 2, won it easily, and he could well take another step forward. He's still lightly raced. I loved how he jumped, and I think he could be perhaps potentially Gordon Elliott's best 2-mile novice chaser this season. The big race was, of course, the John Durkan Chase, and what a race it was. It was a good race on paper, and it delivered yet again. More evidence to the fact that we haven't got to build the entire season around 4 days in March. Factor File got the job done. I was surprised. I was against him. I thought that a few of Willie Mullins would need to run, and he had plenty to find at the ratings. And I must admit, watching the race through, having backed Fast or Slow, I was pretty confident. I was watching Fast or Slow jump very quickly, as was Galopin Des Champs. Was watching Factor File. He was nowhere near as quick from A to B over his fences as the 2 more experienced chasers, and I was feeling quite comfortable and slightly stopped watching him for a fence or two, and then turning in, all of a sudden there he was looming large on the heels of Galopin Des Champs and Fast or Slow. Got to the front going to the last, and then it was just a case of whether Spillane's Tower was going to be able to run him down. But to Factor File's credit, when Spillane's Tower got to his girth, I think he found a little bit more and was very brave in the finish. But this was over 2 mile 4. I think Galopin Des Champs, you have to say that's probably the best he's run in the John Durkan. It's certainly the best he's jumped. He was really pretty quick. Fast or Slow was his usual quick self. They said that the slightly dead ground worked against him from the second last. He got tired. He still ran a great race. And then Spillane's Tower on his first start in open company, the same as Factor File, really finished with a rattle. And the market had been quite cool about him. It was suggesting that he was going to need the run. Factor File got the job done, but he's now into around about 11 to 4 for the Gold Cup. And that is a massive overreaction. I wasn't convinced he was running through the line when he won the Brown Advisory at last year's Cheltenham Festival, and I'd be keen to oppose him. He's going to have to go an extra 2 furlongs at Cheltenham, and his jumping again will need to get quicker. Of the first 4 home, Factor File, Spillane's Tower, Galopin Des Champs and Fast or Slow, I would actually fancy that Factor File would finish last of those 4 if going to the Gold Cup over this distance. Spillane's Tower is the interesting one, particularly if he's got a little bit more to find with fitness. He was running very strong through the line. And of course, you have to respect Galopin Des Champs and Fast or Slow, who departed fairly early in the Gold Cup last year. So I'm not keen to have a particularly strong opinion on the Gold Cup market just yet, but I do think that the current price for Factor File is too short, given that there's a long way to go yet, and he's not, in my book, a confirmed stayer over that trip. A couple of talking points we should just hit on are the latest entry stages for the Welsh Grand National and the King George 2 Christmas features. Welsh Grand National features some quite nice horses. Trelawne, who was a winner of the graduation chase at Haydock at the weekend, he's been given entry from Kim Bailey. Stay Away Faye, well-regarded novice last year. We're yet to see him this year. Nassalam, who won the race last year in emphatic style. I Will Do It, who won it the year before. Mr. Vango, he's an impressive young stayer from Sarah Bradstock's yard. He's certainly fairly high up on my shortlist at the moment. And then Gordon Elliott's got a few in there, the best of which would be Delta Work. I think they're looking to head back to the Grand National with him, so it might well be they try and get him into handicap company and get his mark down a little bit. So the Welsh National, some quite eye-catching horses in there. I'm looking forward to that. At the moment, Mr. Vango, probably about top of my list, but I've not had a deep delve into that yet, so no Ante-Post play from me at this stage. And then the King George, probably the biggest news is that Willie Mullins has no entries now. Today was a scratch stage, so you had to take horses out. I've seen a few people mention on social media that maybe Willie was having a lie-in and had simply forgotten to keep them in. That's not the case. You couldn't forget to keep them in. You had to actively take them out. And obviously the most important one he's taken out is Gaelic Warrior, who was vying for favouritism. Joe Chambers, who's racing manager to Rich and Susanna Ritchie, has said that Willie Mullins said he won't be seen until around about Christmas, and that Willie was keen to keep him at a shorter distance, around about 2 miles, and keep him closer to home. So sounds like Gaelic Warrior definitely isn't going to be going to the King George. There is, of course, a supplementary date. That's on the 18th of December. So Fast or Slow, who some people perhaps rightly think may have missed the original entry stage, could be supplemented at a cost of £4,600. It would have cost them just £1,250 if they'd put him in from the beginning. But I think it's worth flagging that Martin Brazil reported after the John Durkan that he'd had a bit of a bump on the knee and there was some soft tissue swelling. They didn't think it was all that much, but as we know with horses, if things don't heal up quickly and he's forced to miss a little bit of work, it might mean that the King George doesn't become such a viable option. But he could yet have a supplementary entry. And the King George is now looking a fairly weak race because, of course, Ile-Francais, who is still in there, he ran very badly in France last week. He's been off for tests. They think he had a bleed. So you could potentially go against him, and it then makes it a fairly open-looking race. The one that perhaps caught my eye at the moment is Protectorat. He's a strong travelling horse, 2 mile, 4 grade 1 winner. If he went right-handed and travelled nicely, he could be the one. But having looked like a vintage King George, it's now looking like a fairly moderate contest, with Willie Mullins taking all of his entries out at this second scratch stage. So into Handicap Movers and Shakers now, and we have to go all the way back to last Sunday, which was the Greatwood Hurdle Day at Cheltenham. The first one I want to mention is Peaky Boy. He's gone up £7 to a mark of 139. As I mentioned last week, I was really impressed by his chasing debut over a trip that I think was short of his best on ground. It was definitely lively enough. He went down the inner under Nico de Boinville. His jumping was pretty brave in the most part and stayed powerfully up the hill. I think he's a 3-mile chaser in the making. So a mark of 139, I think, will still prove very workable if they look to stay in handicaps. It might be they go graded contest, but for me, get a bit more experience into him, keep him in handicap company. And a mark of 139, if upped in trip or getting on softer ground, as we're now going to get, I think Peaky Boy is still a very well handicapped young horse indeed. Also running on that Sunday and really catching the eye behind the sadly ill-fated Buffalo Soldier was Surrey Quest. He flew home from absolutely nowhere to finish runner-up in that 3-mile 3 chase. It's gone up £2 now to a mark of 139. Runner-up in the Scottish National last year on the soft ground, where he bumped into a very well handicapped Willie Mullins horse. I was quite surprised that he doesn't feature in the Welsh Grand National entries. I think he's a well handicapped horse still on soft ground. Trips of 4 miles will bring out the best in him for trainer Toby Laws. Burdett Road won the Greatwood Hurdle. He's gone up £9 to a mark of 142. Connections say they're going to see him as a champion hurdle horse, and if they're right, this mark of 142 is going to need to prove very workable indeed. Given the murky waters of the champion hurdle picture now, with State Man getting beaten, Lossiemouth with a stone bruise, and obviously Constitution Hill off with bruising, it might be that James Owen chooses to sit on his hands a little bit and wait and see what happens in the Christmas hurdle, and maybe Burdett Road will end up in that. But a mark of 142, I think, is too good to turn down in handicaps if they really believe he's a champion hurdle horse. The Betfair hurdle would look the obvious target, but that is some way off. So definitely still a well handicapped horse, Burdett Road. I'll be interested to see what James Owen does with him. The runner-up was Be Aware. He's gone up £7 now to a mark of 137. He finished very strongly, having perhaps struggled to lie up through the mid part of the race. He was a 2-mile 5 runner-up at Kempton last year as a novice. I think they'll go up in trip with him now. Soft ground will be better for him. Maybe the Betfair hurdle if the ground came up heavy there. A strong gallop, a nice long home straight at Newbury, 2 miles will suit him there. But I definitely see Be Aware as a horse that's interesting if going up in trip off 137. And then Dysart Enos. She's probably come out the best of this in the Greatwood. She's gone up just £4 now to a mark of 135. I think she got a lot wrong in the Greatwood. She was far too free. I saw her trainer Fergal O'Brien said that he felt she jumped very well, and she didn't make a lot of bad mistakes, but I thought her jumping lacked fluidity at a crucial part of the race. She stayed on well, a mark of 135. If she is as good as they think, and I suspect she probably is, that will look very workable. And I'd be surprised they didn't perhaps look to drop her down in grade back into perhaps mares only company. If so, I think a mark of 135 will prove to be a penalty kick for her next time out. A novice chaser who appeared and made a good chasing debut this week is Helnwein. He finished runner-up at Warwick behind Telepathique, travelled really well through the race and jumped with a real confidence, looked very assured at his fences, didn't look like a novice at all. I would suspect he traded a very short price turning in. He travelled much the best, but then jumping the last, he appeared to get very tired on his first start of the season for trainer Alan King and got out-battled at the death, but he's gone up just £1 to a mark of 129. He was the winner of the valuable EBF race last year. He's a talented horse. That form has worked out well already, and I think a mark of 129 back in a similar race, a handicap novice chase over 2 miles, maybe even a little bit further. I think Helnwein looks a very well handicapped horse indeed. Another novice winning on debut was Bucksy Des Epeires. He won at Ascot on Friday. He's gone up £5 from Venetia Williams to a mark of 126. His jumping took a while to warm up. He was a bit brave at a couple and then slow at one or two, but as the tempo of the race quickened up and he got further into the race, his jumping became very assured indeed. This was over 2 mile 3 on good ground at Ascot. His final start last year saw him finish a very strong runner-up over 2 mile 5 on soft ground, finishing hand over fist. So this mark of 126, I think if they go up in trip and now the rain has come and soft ground, and we often talk about that adage of Venetia Williams horses on soft ground, I think 126 will prove more than workable for Bucksy Des Epeires for Venetia Williams, and I'd be very surprised indeed if he couldn't land at least 1, maybe 2 more wins this season. Probably the horse that's been dealt the harshest blow this week is Beauport for Nigel Twiston-Davies. He's gone up £12 to a mark of 156. Now, he was a very impressive 31-length winner at Ascot over the weekend of the 3 mile 5 handicap chase, but it's a race that absolutely fell apart. There was a litany of jumping errors from his rivals. He jumped soundly, was given a positive ride by Toby McCain-Mitchell, handled conditions. He's a smart horse on his day, but 156 horse, he most definitely is not. The connections in the immediate aftermath said that they hoped that win would see that he would sneak into the weights of the Grand National. Well, 146 would have got you in this year, so 156 is definitely going to get him in. I think that's an inflated mark for him. It might well be that they've now got a chance to run him in a few more handicaps, get his mark down a little bit if he doesn't run to this level, which I think is unlikely. And he has been a fairly inconsistent horse previously. So a mark of 156, I would have absolutely no problem whatsoever in opposing Beauport on every run from here on in this season. And then 2 more horses going up in the handicap. The first is Martator, who was a fairly confident next best selection on the SBK betting podcast last week, and he duly landed the money in very comfortable style at Ascot on Saturday under Ned Fox. But he's gone up £11 to a mark of 151. It was a very comfortable viewing spectacle on Saturday if you followed me in on Martator. But actually going down to the last, whereas you're normally shouting at the TV, go on Ned, send him on, I was saying, no, Ned, wait, hold on to him, because this is a horse I think could rack up a sequence this season. He's a really talented animal, but an £11 rise up to 151 is perhaps going to make things difficult. But he has got a high cruising speed. I thought Saint-Brévet set fairly strong fractions early on, tried to make this a test of stamina, and early on, Martator was still fairly keen. He's clearly got plenty of gears, jumped very soundly. He'd made a few fiddly errors on his seasonal return again when winning at this track in October, but he jumped far better here, stayed powerfully to the line. He's a horse that can definitely go up in trip, but he's got loads of gears. 151, where they go from here. Do they try graded company? I'm not quite so sure, but he's a really nice horse, and he's a horse that I will continue to follow until he's proven that he's got to his ceiling. And then one final one, Trelawne, who I mentioned has got a Welsh Grand National entry for Kim Bailey. He's gone up £8 to a mark of 152. He won the graduation chase at Haydock on Saturday, beating Iroko. I'm not sure Iroko was fully tuned up for this race. I think he probably got closer than they perhaps expected and Trelawne out-battled him in the closing stages. Oroka came from a long way back, was given quite a quiet ride from John Joe O'Neill Jr. Trelawne has been quirky before. You might remember he virtually ran off the track at Wetherby last year. He looked far more compliant here in cheek pieces. This trip is probably at his minimum trip. The soft ground is absolutely essential to him. He's a nice horse in the making. They did say that they would perhaps look at the Cotswold Chase, but a mark of 152, jumping from 146 up to a Cotswold Chase would be a fair old lump. I think that maybe there's another race to be won with this horse before they look at graded company. And the Welsh Grand National, again, a big step up in trip, but all he looks to do is gallop and stay. He clearly loves soft ground. He jumped very well for Tom Bellamy, who had a bit of a mixed day on Saturday. So Trelawne off a mark of 152. I wouldn't be too keen to dismiss him just yet. Just one horse coming down in the handicap this week, catching my eye. And if you're an avid follower of these podcasts, he should perhaps already be in your tracker. It's Can You Call for Evan Williams. I flagged him up when I thought he'd been given a fairly quiet ride at Chepstow in October, over 2 miles, 3.5 furlongs, and suggested he would be worth following when the ground turned soft. While he ran again this weekend, the ground was still fairly lively, and they basically just rode a carbon copy as before. He bobbed around at the back of the field. He made a little bit of progress round the home bend, wide on the outside, and then was taken to the inside in behind horses by Adam Wedge. The few in front got away from him, and he just made nice progress under fairly quiet riding up the home straight. But he's been dropped another £3 now, down to a mark of 119. He's just £1 higher than his last winning mark. He's definitely a horse that's going to thrive on soft ground. The ground was still good at Chepstow last week. The rain hadn't yet arrived. There's a decent 2 mile 3 pot at Chepstow in the Welsh Grand National meeting. Evan Williams and the Ruckers have won that plenty of times before. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the target. And Can You Call? I've double checked. I certainly want him in my tracker. I think this is a very well handicapped horse indeed when the rain comes and he gets soft ground. Only one coming down in the handicap. There's a few more yet that interest me, new entries and non-movers. I'll start with the new entries. The first is Woodland Park, a nice novice hurdler for Ollie Murphy. He absolutely sluiced up at Leicester, over 2 mile 4, given a really confident ride by Sean Bowen, ridden patiently, travelled powerfully through the race, got to the front going easily, and then just stayed on nicely. He's a stayer in the making. He's been given an opening mark of 117. He's only a 5-year-old. I think that mark is plenty workable enough for a yard that will bring their novice hurdlers along slowly. I'm sure they'll look and find a nice little handicap placement for him. So Woodland Park, I'd urge you to put him into your tracker. Another one that's got a mark as a novice is Joyeuse. She was awkward at the second last at Ascot when finishing third behind Celtic Dino. And I think that meant that she landed a little bit on all fours and knocked a bit of air out of her lungs and took a blow on her first start for a while and stayed on under considerate handling by Nico de Boinville. She's out of a mare who's a half-sister to Epatante, so very well-bred mare. The ground, I think, would probably been lively enough. She won her maiden at Taunton on soft ground. And the mare she beat there, Tutti Quanti, is rated 125. So this mark of 119 just automatically looks more than workable for Nicky Henderson. JP Mouse colours, of course, you always associate JP with a handicap plot or two. So Joyeuse certainly has gone into my notebook. I think she's a filly that will have plenty more to give yet, particularly when getting back on perhaps her preferred soft ground. And then just one more, who was a staple in this podcast last year, Hasthing for John Joe O'Neill, again another JP horse. He ran over 2 miles at Chepstow, made his chasing debut, jumped fairly moderately. John Joe O'Neill Jr. had to work pretty hard to organise him. He was pretty slow at a couple, quite big at a couple. He finished fourth, was given a fairly considerate ride. He's got an opening mark of 118. This was 2 miles on fairly lively ground. This is a horse that definitely needs soft ground and ideally further than 2 miles as well. He's a 119 rated hurdler. I fancied that mark was workable enough. I did wonder whether they'd have stayed over hurdles this year and taken advantage of that mark of 119. But he's got an opening mark of 118 over fences. He will need to brush up his jumping, but I'm sure this first experience won't be lost on him. So Hasthing, if he's not stayed in your tracker from last year, put him back in. Now he's over fences. I'm sure there's a race or two to be won with him. And then to wrap up Handicap Movers and Shakers, we've got 2 non-movers. The first is Imperial Jade. She finished third at Wincanton, beaten 6 lengths in a conditional jockey's hurdle last week, but she got absolutely butchered on the home bend. Under Elizabeth Gale, she made quite nice progress down the back, and where the rail drops away, Elizabeth Gale made good use of the ground, but then the rail joined back in on the bend, and she hadn't quite got her pitch and got squeezed out, shuffled a long way back, lost some momentum, and she then made nice progress up the home straight. It would be an exaggeration to say she flew home, but she just kept on coming and looked like a horse that will stay this 2 mile 4, stay a little bit further. This was a second start after a wind up. Just plugged on nicely, got a mark of 95, and that followed on another third place effort at Chepstow, where the winner, Loverdoes, has already run well off a £6 higher mark. That horse is now rated £13 higher, and she's just £2 higher for that Chepstow run. So I think 2 mile 4 for Imperial Jade for Charlie Longston looks a mark that could be exploited in a fairly low grade handicap. And then just one final one to mention, Bruit, who finished third behind Martator, who of course I really like, at Ascot this weekend. He set fairly strong fractions, looked to be perhaps paying the price for that as he weakened turning in, couldn't seem to go the gallop, but in the closing stage he stuck on really well, eventually rallied into third. I think he's ready for 2 mile 4 now. He's a 2 mile 6 furlong runner-up in Grade 2 company back in France on soft ground, so stamina certainly shouldn't be an issue. He's learning to relax now. He was very, very free when he first arrived in the UK last year. He was settled enough for Harry Cobden. This time, I think that maybe they'll look to go up in trip with him now, and a mark of 139 might not prove to be beyond him just yet. So I'm delighted to be joined this week by, I think, a man we can say is definitely in very good form. Charlie, short spell on the sidelines, back then at Ascot with a double, up to Haydock, and your old favourite Royal Pagaille landed a second Betfair Chase. By my calculation, that's now 4 from 8 since you're back, so 50% strike rate, and a Grade 1 to boot. Talk us through Royal Pagaille at the weekend, because I've certainly, I mean, he can get quite low at defence, can't he? But he didn't jump as well as I've seen him, but he has become this sort of ultimately efficient machine. Sort of reminded me when I was a student, sort of, putting the car in neutral and coasting down a hill to save fuel and trying to time your run up to the traffic lights so you don't have to touch the brakes. He's become very efficient. How were you feeling through the race? Were you confident every stage, or were you concerned at points?
Yeah, on the first circuit, I was a little concerned. He was just being very careful on the approach to the fences, and he wasn't being brave at them at all. And I suppose his last run, he did fall and have a bad injury in the Cotswold Chase, so it made sense that he was being careful. He's never been the flashiest of jumpers, as in as some horses, but he was just very much A to B, and we were losing a bit of ground at the fences, but with the ground the way it was, it probably was very efficient, and no point wasting energy with flashy jumps anyway.
And I mean, so that takes him to 5 from 6 at Haydock now. I often think probably if you took a view across the season and tried to find the sort of most attritional races of the season, Haydock as a collective would come on top. So I think that clearly says he's an exceptionally brave horse. Do you feel that when you're riding? Can you feel him that? Because we talk about that will boost a horse's confidence, getting their head in front. Can you feel him sort of digging deep? Is there a different sensation on him in a finish to perhaps one that doesn't go into the red quite as well as he does?
Yeah, he's just got. I think the way he carries himself as well. He's got a long and low way of carrying himself, and he like you say, he does dig in deep. And I think when he felt the other horse make a mistake, he was, you could feel him sticking his neck out and really trying for me. He's just got a lot going for him in that sense. He wants to do it, and he enjoys it. So he seems to want to win. From the minute he gets to Haydock, I think you see him walking around the paddock, and he just has a presence about him, and he's excited cantering to the post. He's excited running to the first. Everything you can tell, almost get a feeling of him that he is excited to be there and wants to do his job. So, yeah, definitely that makes my job easier.
So, I mean, an affinity for Haydock. I mean, not all that far up the road is another pretty pretty famous racecourse. Handicappers put him up £1 to a mark of 166. Assuming that I am Maximus, and they seem to be saying that they want to go back and try and defend his Grand National title. He's on 169. So feasibly, and it sounds mad to say it, doesn't it? But off a mark of 166, you could go to the Grand National and not have top weight. Do you think that's the sort of race that would suit him? I mean, we talk about the fences now not being as big and as stiff as they were, and low efficient jumpers, and almost sort of the MO these days. Is that something you've thought about? Have you had a discussion with Venetia? Is that a possibility, do you think?
I haven't really. We haven't had a discussion, but I suppose it's obviously I leave all the race planning really to Venetia and the owner. But I do know that he does like to keep things very simple, and like I think that's why he likes Haydock. Just you turn the bend, and then you've got a straight line of fences, and you turn the bend, you've got a straight line of fences, and I just find he doesn't like too much fuss. I rode him in the Irish National, and for whatever reason, he might not have been going that day, but he just really didn't enjoy it. And then we had a lot of horses around us, and he really, really didn't enjoy it. But I don't know. You never say never. It's just, yeah. He may get away with it, I suppose, over those fences nowadays, because he can just get close to them and rub them.
Yeah.
It's an unknown, but just the hustle and bustle of it, I know he would rather it be simple, obviously, like most horses, but he does like to have things very simple for him. And I think that's the way Haydock suits him. It just needs to be very straightforward. I've ridden him at Cheltenham a few times, and the undulations annoy him somehow, and the way the fences are, some are uphill and some are downhill, and it almost annoys him. He is a very simple character, and he's just very straight, likes things straightforward, and yeah.
That's really insightful, because I wouldn't have for a second thought that watching him, from the safety of my own settee, we talk about him being a lovely straightforward horse, albeit he gets quite low and he tries hard. I do like that angle with you and Venetia. You sort of obviously you retain rider, stable jockey to her, so you do get to form these relationships with horses. Which brings me on actually to a horse I absolutely love, and was desperate to ask you about him. Martator, you won him at Ascot at the start of the season. Obviously, I'm sure you're furious at not being able to be in two places at once at the weekend. And Ned Fox took over, and he won really nicely again at Ascot, up £11. He reminds me of Funambule de Savola. Am I mad in thinking that he's perhaps of that ilk, and perhaps sort of a horse that I think Funambule de Savola always went under the radar, wasn't necessarily seen as being a classy graded horse, and yet was able to transfer between handicaps and was placed in two champion chases. Does Martator have that sort of ability, do you think?
I hope so. You never know till you try those races, really. You know you're going to get close, but you don't know till you put them in a top class race like those. But Funambule, no, the first time I rode Martator at Aintree, actually, I did mention Funambule after the race, because it's funny you say that, because I say he's very similar way of going, and we were third that day. He made a very bad mistake, but so it's funny you say that, because I did say to Venetia that he's very similar in the way he carries himself and jumps, and very efficient and quick, and he's got a great brain as well at his obstacles. Hopefully he looks like he's going that way, and I really do hope so. I've had a lot of fun on Funambule, and he's been great to me, and we've really enjoyed him, and hopefully he'll be back not too long.
And so he's Funambule and Martator are both speedy, quick jumping 2-milers. Royal Pagaille, a slow jumping slogger over 3 miles. Maybe I'm wrong, but I see you as far preferring races over fences. Like, I think you come into your own when it's presenting horses at fences. If you were going to create a race scenario for yourself, so a distance, a track, a type of horse and maybe even a sort of type of race pace. What do you feel is the scenario that you most enjoy and perhaps give you your sort of best chance to shine? Do you think?
It's a difficult one. I think I like Newbury, and like you talk about Funnable, and he was very good. He's always very good around Newbury, and I think he set a track record there on good to firm ground. And But I just find it very straightforward track, and the fences flow around there. But it just depends on what you're on. I enjoy riding, very top class 3 milers and top class 2 milers. So I can't really. 2 milers good fun because they just almost do a lot for you because you're going so fast. You need them to use their brains more. But all the good horses, they really do place themselves well. And the 2 mile race is fun for the speed, and then a 3 mile race is just nice if you can get into a good rhythm and start seeing strides, which is really nice. Cheltenham's really good fun if you get in a good rhythm and get jumping, but if you don't, it's pretty rough. Yeah.
Yeah. So top class, basically. Put you on a top class one, and you're happy enough.
Yeah.
I suppose that the top
Most
class
people
horse
say
of
that.
Venetia at the moment is Presse. The King George. I don't know if you've obviously been travelling around the country today, no doubt riding out and then up at Southwell. King George has cut up quite a lot today with Willie Mullins taking all of his out, including Gaelic Warrior. Presse is still in there. Did you have a look, and did you sort of get a bit of an extra bounce to your stride and think that maybe that's become a more winnable race? For all that, I think you probably agree that right-handed is probably not his best direction.
I've only just heard today that that headline, but it's obviously if Willie Mullins isn't there, it's always good. And I never look into races too much until very close to the day because there's so much that happens. I know it's boring, but and we've got so many races in between, and I always try and leave homework till last minute if I can get away with it. But just because you've always got a ride before, so I try and take it as it comes.
Well, I'm going to take that on advice then and slightly frame this next question differently. Presse in the Gold Cup last year jumped second last in front, ran a great race, fourth in the Gold Cup. You can't knock that. Do you feel he showed his best version of himself last year? Obviously, he had a troubled or tricky passage for Venetia and the team to get him to Cheltenham last year. Do you feel that's as good as he is, or did you sort of pull up thinking, I'd love to come back next year with a smoother prep?
It's a good question. Obviously, pulling up, you always think, oh, I wonder if we can eke out more. And he's run a very good race, but I completely believe in him. So, and he's my horse. So, well, not my horse, but my ride. So I'd like to think that we could eke out more. But his prep was, I can't remember exactly. I'm not there every day, but I think his prep was pretty good before. But you never know with horses. You never know what the ins and outs of them are. So I like to think that maybe there could be something we could do, and not do, but if he just happened to be 1,000,000% on the day, he maybe couldn't eke out more. But he may have been 1,000,000%, but it's hard to know, isn't it? It's just I'd love to have another go on him anyway, that's for sure, and see.
No, he's just a thoroughly likable horse, and clearly loves Cheltenham. We're changing now from Cheltenham from the old course to the new course purely for selfish reasons. Really, I wanted to sort of pick your brain on the differences that you find between the old course and the new course, and perhaps a type of horse that would struggle on the old course and might find the new course a slightly easier setup?
Yeah, I much prefer the new course because you've just got a bit more time, and it feels like there's less turning, and it's easier to get into a rhythm on the new course. The old course, you do sometimes feel like you're on the turn, and you come down the hill a million miles an hour, and you're always jumping, and then you turn in, and bam, bam, you got two fences. So the old course can feel a bit like a bit of a rush, whereas the new course you can just relax and enjoy it. But I suppose, like a horse like Royal Pagaille, you'd if you were going to Cheltenham, you'd hope that you're going for the new course, even long press as well. They're yeah, definitely new course.
So horses that take a while to warm up can give them a chance on the new course, and on the old course not. Just going right back, so I mentioned at the start that you had a spell on the sidelines with a concussion. Just think it'd be interesting for people that don't know, and I know a little bit about it, but not a huge amount. What's the sort of protocol, and what sort of assistance do you get from Oaksey House, the jockey club, going forward? So you get the bang on the head, you get stood down. I think it's called being put on the red list. What's the steps you have to go through to get back into the saddle to ride your double at Ascot?
So Jerry Hill, who's a BHA doctor, I'm not sure if that's his exact title, but he gets in contact, and he's brilliant at getting the ball rolling. And he told me to go to Oaksey House. I think the following week. Was it? I had a week of rest, and then so the week we had a week of rest, and then go to Oaksey House the following week, and saw physio, and then I got on a bike and got assessed to see how I handled doing a bit of fitness, which was fine. And then the following day, I went off to see a neurologist which he organised in Oxford, who assessed me. I think he looked into my eyes and did all sorts of tests that mean nothing to me, but obviously meant something to him. And then I had a concussion test, which as jockeys we do a baseline concussion test, which is lots of tests for funny things like remembering words and cards and colours and all sorts, and it's very confusing at the best of times. But you do a baseline, and then they compare your if you are concussed, they can compare it to your baseline. So I did that, and I was that week I was in a bit of a. When did I do that? I can't remember now. I did it on the Thursday, but Jerry made it able so that I could be jocked up for the Saturday and the Friday. He put me on amber, I think, so I could be jocked up, and they did the test and just check if they're clear, and if they weren't, then I suppose I'd be taken off. But it was a bit. I was very nervous doing the tests anyway, and the concussion test. I wouldn't like doing those types of tests on a good day. I wasn't that interested in academics, but and luckily it's not about how clever or stupid you are. It's just you against you. So
Yeah,
a good
and
thing.
and you got close enough. I
Yeah.
actually know of one jockey that got a bang on the head, and actually when he went for his concussion test, he scored higher the second time than he had the first time. So
Yeah.
the forward had obviously knocked a bit of sense into him.
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to let you go because I know you got precious couple of weeks now as a two before you become a three as a family. Just before I go, just one name of a horse coming this season that you're sort of excited about that we perhaps might not have heard of.
Oh God, I haven't really thought about this one. What have we got? There's a nice horse. nice horse of Venetia's that might be worth keeping on side, probably in the long run, called Lemoncello. He ran in a novice at Bangor the other day and didn't do anything special, but I think it'd be worth keeping him on side. But I'm not saying he's going to go and win and bolt up next time, but yeah, might be just worth following.
Brilliant. I like the long game, Charlie. I appreciate that. Look,
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking time out. You're busy people, so it's really good you come on this evening and give us your thoughts. And I hope you just keep kicking on through the season, and maybe we'll catch up with you after the King George and the Cheltenham Gold Cup this year. That would be a good thing to aim for.
Yeah, something to aim for anyway. Brilliant.
Thanks,
Thank you
Charlie.
very much, Ross. Thank you. Bye.
So that's it for another episode of Miller's Movers. We're rattling through the season now. Huge thanks to Charlie Deutsch for coming on and giving us his thoughts. I love when you get considered answers from people, and I think we certainly got that. Plenty good of information in there. And remember the name Lemoncello, perhaps not this season, maybe even next season, but a horse to keep your eye out for. I'll be back same time next week when we'll be reviewing the Fighting Fifth and the Hennessy from Newbury.